Hello everyone, I am Natalia and I am a product manager at Duolingo, and I am here to talk about audio lessons, a new feature that we're currently working on and that's going to be available on Duolingo later this year. I am also going to talk about how we build new features at Duolingo and how we use something called A/B testing to ensure the success of the new features that we launch. Audio lessons are going to be a new section of the app where you will encounter a completely new learning experience. These are listening and speaking lessons that you can listen to while on the go. You really don't even have to look at your phone. You can complete them hands-free. And the main goal of these lessons is, first of all, to give learners an opportunity to really practice their speaking and their listening skills. For example, in audio lessons, you get to listen to real native speakers having conversations in the language that you're learning. You also get lots of speaking exercises and tips to improve your pronunciation, so you can start sounding like a native in no time. Next, we wanted to help learners even more to get conversational in the language that they're learning. We focus on teaching key phrases and expressions that are likely to come up a lot in everyday situations. For example, we teach you what you say when you're going to the grocery store to buy something, or when you're introducing yourself to someone new for the first time, or just to ask, what do you say when you ask for directions? You actually also get to practice participating in these conversations, which I think is super cool. Next, we also wanted to give learners a way to learn a language hands-free. As I said, you don't really need to even look at your phone when you're doing these lessons. I like to do them while I am, for example, doing the laundry or going on a walk or cooking. They are a really easy way of fitting more language learning into your day. Okay, so now that I've talked a bit about the main goals of the feature, I am now going to play a short video that will give you an even better idea of what these audio lessons are.
Bonjour Estelle.
Bonjour, Paul.
So we've already learned 2 French greetings.
The first was bonjour.
Bonjour, monsieur.
Bonjour, madame.
Of course, bonjour means good morning or good afternoon.
And the second was
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir, Anna.
Bonsoir, Thomas.
right, bonsoir, which means good evening. And finally, we learned how to say goodbye.
Yep, au revoir.
Au revoir, Hélène.
Au revoir, Marc.
Let's do a speaking exercise to review. Repeat after Estelle.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
These are great ways to greet people in Paris. But what if you want to say more than that? What if you need to ask a question while traveling?
Maybe find the train station or the subway?
Or even more important,
What's that?
the bathroom.
Right.
Très important.
Yes, très important. Very important.
Let's start with something else you might want to ask about, like le métro.
Ah, yes, the subway.
Uh-huh. Le métro.
Le métro.
Le here just means the. Le métro.
Le métro.
Yep, and the French R is in the middle of métro, so it sounds like you're clearing your throat. Ro. Métro.
Métro.
Excellent. Now let's plug le métro into something useful, like où est le métro?
Où est le métro?
Exactly. Où est le métro?
And that means, where is the subway?
Yep.
We can definitely hear le métro.
Uh-huh. And at the beginning, you're hearing où.
Okay, so hopefully that gave you a good idea of what audio lessons are. Now I am going to talk about how we build this feature. So what happened between the moment when we decided we wanted to start working on audio lessons to the moment that we actually are going to release this feature? So the first step, after we decided we wanted to work on audio lessons, was to brainstorm. So we brainstormed with the team, we came up with lots of different ideas for what these lessons would sound like, for what they would look like, for the format of the lessons, also what we would teach. And we came up with lots of different ideas, and we picked a few that we liked the best, and then we prototyped them. A prototype is just an example of, or a demo of what some of these ideas may actually look like in practice. And since these were audio lessons, a lot of our prototypes were actually just audio recordings that we just recorded on our phones. But they were super helpful to give us a better sense of how these ideas may turn out. After prototyping a few examples, we shared them with people outside Duolingo. We reached out to real Duolingo learners and we asked for their feedback on all of these different prototypes. And it quickly became clear which of these ideas was likely to work best. Next, it was time to implement the idea. And this required creating content for it. So we had to write lots of different scripts for these lessons. We also had to produce the lessons. We had to polish the designs for the feature. And finally, the software engineers implemented the feature on the app. Once we implemented this feature in the app, we started releasing it to a small group of learners, just to see how they would interact with the feature. Now, you may think this is where things ended, but actually this is where things began. So after releasing our initial version of audio lessons to a small group of learners, we started iterating and A/B testing. And iterating just refers to the process of making small and big changes to the original idea just to try to improve the feature for our learners. A/B testing refers to how we actually make sure that these changes are in fact improving the experience and not making it worse. So the way A/B testing works is that, first of all, we have this group of learners who have access to audio lessons. And so 50% of these learners see the original version of audio lessons without any changes. The other 50% start seeing audio lessons with all of the changes that we're making. Then we compare how these two groups of users perform, how they interact with the app, and we see whether they're liking the feature more. So in fact, since releasing the audio lessons feature to a small group of learners, we have made lots of changes to the experience. For example, we made changes to the format. The initial version of audio lessons just had one host, so there was just one person speaking the whole time. And we changed that because we got feedback from our learners that this wasn't super engaging. In fact, if you listen to the radio or you listen to podcasts, you probably realize that it is very rare that you will listen to just one person speak the whole time. It is way more engaging, way more fun to listen to people having a conversation. So more than one person having a conversation or an interview. So that's what we did with audio lessons. We added another host and we saw that this made the lessons a lot more fun. Another change that we made to audio lessons was adding speaking exercises, which the original version of audio lessons did not have. And we did this because people wanted to practice all the new words and expressions that they were learning. They also wanted to get some feedback on how they were doing. So we added these speaking exercises, which also made the experience a lot more interactive. And lastly, to make this experience even more interactive, we also started highlighting on screen keywords and expressions as they were being introduced in the lessons. And we did this because we discovered that some learners were not just multitasking when they were listening to these lessons, but they were actually staring at the screen during the whole time. So obviously, this change made that experience for them feel a lot more engaging. You may be wondering how we define success when we A/B test. And there's two main things that we look at when we A/B test. The first, we want to make sure that these changes are improving how we teach. They're improving learning. So we ask questions like, are people actually remembering the new phrases and the new words that we're teaching? Next, we want to make sure that these changes are improving engagement. One of the hardest things about learning a language is keeping yourself motivated over a long period of time. Language learning doesn't just happen in one day. So we put a lot of effort into making the lessons fun. How do we measure fun? How do we make sure that the changes are improving engagement? So if I were a teacher and this were my classroom, I could look around and see how my students are reacting to the lessons. So I could tell whether they're falling asleep, whether they're looking at their phones, whether they're looking out the window. However, if someone is not having fun in an audio lesson, they can just leave and check out social media or go do something else. So that's actually something that we look at. We look at lesson completion rate. And this is out of everybody who starts an audio lesson, what percentage of those people go on to finish it? And this is the lesson completion rate. And lesson completion rate is super important because it gives us a good sense of how fun the lessons are. The higher the completion rate, the more fun the lessons are likely to be. So when we first rolled out the original version of audio lessons, the one that didn't have all the changes that I discussed, the lesson completion rate was around 50%. So half of the people who started a lesson would not go on to finish it. And this wasn't great. However, when we A/B tested all of the changes that I talked about, the lesson completion rate was close to 100%. So this was great. This was a good indication that these lessons were actually helping making the lessons more engaging. So based on this, we were pretty confident that these changes were good and that we should move forward with them. However, things don't always go so smoothly. Some of the A/B tests that we have run at Duolingo have not been successful. Even the ones that we were pretty confident were going to work out, some of them actually hurt learning and engagement. So that's why it's super important for us to A/B test any change that we bring to the app, even if we're pretty sure that it's going to help. So to summarize, iterating and A/B testing allows us to, first of all, learn from people using the feature and identify the parts of the app the parts of the feature that need improvement. Next, it allows us to verify whether the changes that we're making to the feature are improving the experience and not hurting the experience. And finally, it allows us to move faster by showing the feature to a small number of learners at first, and often by just starting with one course, we can quickly learn what works, what doesn't, and apply all of those learnings to when we are actually creating content for the other courses or when we start rolling out this feature to more and more learners. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed learning about audio lessons and enjoyed Duocon. If you have any questions, I am happy to answer them now.
Natalia, your job sounds very complex. Can you tell us a bit more about the processes involved in creating audio lessons? Like, how long does that take and how many people are working on it?
Yeah, so I talked a bit about before, creating audio lessons has been like an ongoing project. We've been working on it for almost like about a year now. There's a lot that's involved. For example, we really need to come up with a format that is effective at teaching, is effective at having users participating in a conversation in the language that they're learning, but also that is fun. The current format is not the first format that we came up with. It's actually also not going to be the final format for audio lessons. We're always working on improvements to the process. And so just to give you an idea, the first step in creating an audio lessons is creating the curriculum for what we call the skill or the collection of lessons. And that's where we decide kind of, okay, what are we going to teach? What's the conversation that we want users to be able to take part in? by the end of the lesson. And once we decide that, we hand off the curriculum to a writer, and the writer kind of works with our learning scientists to come up with the script. And once that script is, the first draft of a script is completed, some of our team members take a look at it, really give feedback on, okay, is there enough repetition here? Is everything like super clear? Is it fun? Are we including some sort of jokes? Are we making this lesson very interesting? And once we address a bunch of the comments that our team members give, then it's actually time for us to do like a rough recording. We record the script on our phones, and this helps us give a better idea of like, first, how long is the lesson? We try to make it no longer than 5 minutes. Sometimes it ends up being a lot longer than that, and then we have to go back and change everything in the script, and really like, you know, do another round of edits. And that at that point, we usually also have people who have never looked at the script, who were not part of the editing process, listen to a rough recording and provide even more feedback. And then once we finalize the script, that's when we actually record it. We have our voice actors record the script, and then we have a sound designer put all of the recordings together. Right now, we're not having voice actors record in the same room, for example. So we have to have a sound editor listen to all of the recordings and put everything together, add some of the sound effects. And that's not even the final step. The final step is actually uploading all the different audio files into the app and QAing it, which means just trying it out in the app, making sure there's no bugs, there's no errors. And we do that actually a few times because there's always like an error here and there. And you know, that takes about a month for each audio lessons skill. So for like about 3 lessons. And that's something that we're constantly doing. So it really does take a lot of time to produce these lessons, but it's also a very fun experience.
Wow, so you're doing all of that and then it goes to the A/B testers. And you've already put all this work in. What if they don't like it? Have they ever said, no, we don't like this thing? You're like, oh, I loved that. Why don't you like it?
Well, that's why we have people who have never heard the lessons listen to them and provide feedback before we even put it in the app. So that generally gives us a good idea of like, okay, how are real users, real learners going to respond to the lessons? But even then, you know, people have lots of different opinions. It could turn out that they don't like it, in which case we do interviews. We interview our learners and we ask like, hey, what didn't you like about it? And okay, maybe it didn't have enough repetition. Maybe we're teaching too many things in a single lesson. And so we take this feedback and we go back to the lesson, we change it, maybe we add more repetition, maybe we split that lesson up into 2 lessons, and then we try again. And again, like one of the things that we are trying to optimize for, that we're trying to increase, is the lesson completion rate. So that also gives us a good idea of like, okay, are people liking this or are they not?
Has anything really surprised you that's come out of the A/B testing?
Yeah, so one interesting thing that has come up is so our first audio lesson actually teaches greetings. So it teaches how to say very basic greetings like hello and how are you. And you can probably imagine that someone who's just starting learning, for example, French, may really want to know, how to say hello, how are you? But not all of our users are beginners. We actually have learners who have been learning a language for a long time, and they may not want to go through that. They may not want to go through those very basic lessons until they reach the more intermediate ones. And so actually one thing that we're currently working on that we haven't solved yet, but that we're working on is finding a way for learners who, maybe like intermediate level or more advanced level, skip some of the content that we've already created and access content that is more appropriate for their levels.
You mentioned in your talk, how do we measure fun? Something that I think a lot of people wouldn't think could be measured. But what's the importance of fun in the learning process?
Yeah, so you can think of it as, if this were a classroom, like a physical classroom, or your typical, college class, language class, you have invested a lot at this point. You have a teacher there motivating you to keep coming to class. You have like a routine set up. Like I know, every Tuesday at 10 a.m. I'm gonna go to my Spanish class, my French class. But that's not the case for Duolingo. People don't generally have like a set schedule. So you have to choose every day that you come to Duolingo. This is like a choice you have to make every day. And if the experience isn't fun, if the lessons are not engaging, you're just never gonna come back to the app because there's nothing else there's no one there telling you, hey, you gotta do your Duolingo lessons, other than Duo through our notifications. But really making our experience as fun as possible is the only way we can have to make sure that people come back to the app and follow through their goals to learn a language.
How long does the A/B process last for? Or is it like from now until the end of time?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We've been working on Duolingo for years, and we're still running A/B tests to make the app better and better. That's why it's been getting better and better because of A/B testing. There's always things to improve. There's always ways to make the learning experience more efficient, always ways to make the experience more fun. Always, there's ways to provide different experience, like stories to our learners. And so it kind of doesn't end. I mean, a specific experiment can end. So we may, for example, run an A/B test for a specific set of audio lessons skills. And then that particular A/B test ends after like a month or so. But then after that comes another A/B test that we're gonna want to run to improve the experience or add more content, etc.
What's the most fun part of your job?
I would say that's just working on creating learning experiences that are completely new. That we are not just following something that has already been done. We kind of have to be very creative when coming up with new features like audio lessons. And besides that, it's just knowing that people are going to be using these tools to fulfill their passion for languages, and for free, and making sure that these tools are like accessible to anyone who has access to like a computer or a phone. So I think that's the most fun part of the job.
Natalia, it's so interesting to hear about all of the work you do. Thanks so much for sharing with us.
And thank you so much.